For more than 100 years, the Haley Red Family Foundation has proudly supported Auburn University scholarships, investing in students' dreams and brighter futures. For over 25 years, we've also stood beside the Sheriff's Girls Ranch, helping young women find hope and opportunity. The Haley Red Family Foundation, building generations of success.
Welcome in again, everybody, to the Terry Bowden Show on the Auburn Undercover Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Sanders, and today we've got a special guest with us. And I've been fired for both these guys. Ron Zook.
Hey, Ronnie, I'm not sure you're bad luck. We got fired. We got fired right after you. Just kidding.
Maybe it's his fault.
Yeah, we got to turn this thing around a little bit. But Ron, good to see you, and been a long time. But tell everybody kind of what you're doing now. But just to get us all caught up now, because I'm retired. I'm officially retired, and they're seeing me on this podcast now.
Well, I don't consider myself officially retired.
Yeah.
Still, I watch more football now probably or games-wise than I ever have. I go down and spend a lot of time with John Gruden. I got to get my football fix here, college and pro. Predominantly with him, it's in the NFL. But, the game has changed. It's not the same. When I say it's changed, it's still the greatest game. But I think what it teaches players and what you get out of it is not the same as it was maybe when we were coming up and coming through it. But, I stay involved. I kind of have an idea what's going on. And, when you see all these coaches get fired, I know quite a few guys on staffs. And, I spent this weekend texting them and, guys, there's not a whole lot you can say. It's a tough thing. And, people say, well, they're getting all that money. I said, it rips your heart out. I don't know. It's a tough deal. And a lot of times things happen that are out of your control that you have no control over. And I always kind of look at it as the program getting better or is the program getting worse?
Right.
If it's not getting better, then maybe that's for whatever reason that's the way it should be. But if the program's on the swing up, then you gotta hang with the guy.
Well, that's what I don't see as much of, and we talked about this with Hugh Freeze, who I know pretty well, and I say you wish a school could just hang on. It looked like it was not heading in a good direction, but gosh, let's see the thing through. Is it really urgent that you'd have to do this? And I guess that's where social media comes in, pressure by people who make those decisions, I guess. And, I guess the first thing I might say, it seems like guys are getting fired more and more now, quicker and faster. But we used to if they didn't like our performance in the old days, they didn't hang on too long. We didn't quite have all the social. No, I know. My dad's gone through it. My brother's gone through it. I've gone through it. You've gone through it. And almost every coach I know at one point in time has to go through it. But I guess because social media is out there, everybody talks about it a lot more, and we're just so much more aware of it now.
There's a lot more, should we say, guys that know the game better than the coaches or more.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you listen to some of these people and I just kind of shake my head. Really, do you really think that's what he was thinking, or do you really think that's, coaches make decisions based on all the information that they have. And there's no hindsight's 20/20. So sometimes you make wrong decisions, but at the time you thought that was the right decision to make, and it's easy to go back and question them and. Well, why would you do this or why would you do that? You kind of like looking at the game. Yes, the Kansas City game. I think you got to say the Kansas City Chiefs are a pretty good football team, and the pretty good coaches. Well, yeah, they're going through some times right now that people aren't accepting. But don't question the coach, and you don't get dumb or smart overnight. I mean, it's there's a lot of factors that contribute to it.
It makes me curious. Is there what's the difference in coaching? I don't think there's none of us Bowdens who have all coached, from Tommy to my dad to my brother Jeff and myself. None of us really ventured into the NFL. We were all Southern born and bred, and where the greatest honors to coach on Saturdays. You were from Ohio. I coached at Akron for 7 years, and the honor quite often is to coach on Sundays up there. But do you see, and I always wonder, what's the difference in coaching pro and college. Is it harder for one or just different?
You know, Terry, I never had any inclination, never wanted to coach in the NFL, never pursued the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Cowher called me from the Steelers, and I really didn't want to go. In fact, my first question to him was, well, how do you coach these guys?
Yeah.
And Coach Cowher said, you coach them just like you coach your guys. And really, in my, I've had I've had the opportunity to coach, the Pittsburgh Steelers, a great organization. Kansas City Chiefs, a great organization. Green Bay Packers, a great organization. The New Orleans Saints was a little different, but still a great, great coaches and great organization. And so I had a great experience. But it's still, you coach them the same way. You treat them with respect, but players want to be coached. They want to be pushed, and they want to, they know this. Now they'll question you in the NFL, which I never had a problem with. But if they know you can help them get to where they want to go, then they're going to try to do what you ask them to do. Yeah. And I think what it forced me to do was really, a lot of times you see maybe coaches putting players in position where, not that it's not a good thing, but maybe that particular player, it's not good for that particular player. I think you have to, everybody's different. And I think as a coach, you have to kind of figure out what the player does or doesn't do well, and keep him out of situations that are not good, and try to keep him in as many situations as you can that they have a chance to be successful. They're going to play better that way. They got more confidence. As you well know, football is a reaction game.
Right.
If they're thinking, they're not going to play. They're going to play slow. And our thing was always play fast. You're better off doing a little bit fast than a lot slow.
Right.
And,
we did a lot fast. Talk a little bit about yesterday. Hugh Freeze gets the plug pulled. I remember you walked in, and we knew something was up. Loxley, I was in Mike Loxley's office on Sunday after we lost to Mississippi State, and we had the door closed. He said, "Do you think we can make it?" I said, "No." And then and then Monday morning, your car was not was not at the stadium, so we all knew something was up. And then you walked in and said, "Well, boys, they're pulling the plug."
Ronnie, how close we were. I mean, it was, you're playing all the freshmen. And I remember Coach Bowden, your dad, Terry, told me, or he said, didn't tell me this, was when I first got to Florida. And I don't know whether he was just trying to mess with the Florida fans or. Yeah. But he says, for every you're going to lose a game for every freshman you start. Yeah. And I told our staff, oh, shit, that ain't good. We're starting a bunch of freshmen. And I don't know if Coach Bowden meant that or he was trying to mess with me and the Gators. But we were playing, and we knew we were going to be a young team and going to get better. And that was the year that they canceled our game and made us play it in the open date. Right. And we were a tired team. We were young. You get halfway through the season with a bunch of freshmen, and they are wore out. They've hit the wall, and Mississippi State was just coming off an open date. And I begged the AD. I said, let us play the game at the end of the year. Well, in hindsight, I kind of realized, I think they already knew what they wanted to do, so they weren't gonna. But we, we'd have been all right. It's just the way it happened, the way it was.
The way it goes. All I know is that on the day that they named the Bobby Bowden Field at FSU, my dad had not lost to Steve Spurrier ever in the stadium, and you beat him on the day that they named. I don't know if you remember that, but you beat him in Tallahassee on the day they renamed their field Bobby Bowden Field. And that was one thing. Coach Spurrier had a lot of success, obviously, but he had never beat my dad on that field.
Well, that was a great night, great fun. Obviously, it was my last game as the Gator coach. And we had a lot of fun. It was and they, once again, it was two good football teams. And you get into those kind of games. I know this. One of the greatest games I ever coached in was 1991, in the swamp against the Florida State Seminoles. And you talk about, it was 1991. It was November the 30th. Right. It's been 95 degrees. There were, half the rosters were end up playing in the NFL. Right. All banned. We ended up winning 14-9, but it was a battle. And that was one of the greatest games I ever been part of.
Well, another thing I think our listeners are interested in, because it's a constant argument in the Deep South. Not only were you coaching at the University of Florida in the Southeastern Conference, but you were the head coach at Illinois, Big Ten Coach of the Year in Illinois. And the big question is football better in the SEC or is it better in the Big Ten? What's the comparison? What's the difference? Is there a better or worse league?
Well, that's a hard question.
I know.
At the time when I was in Illinois, I mean, Ohio State, Michigan. The year that we went to the Rose Bowl, we were a pretty good football team. Uh-huh. But the thing that the SEC has is more teams at that level.
Right.
Now, I mean, you got to. It's like the schedule that Alabama just went through the last few weeks. I mean, that's a pretty daunting schedule, and when you're playing, and it's hard to keep a team at that level every single week. You look at the NFL. I mean, it's just, I watch an NFL team and I'll come home and I'll say, there's no way. Those guys are awful. You put them on the game that Thursday night or Friday or Sunday night. And I mean, they're unbelievable. Just that level. And it's that much. And it's hard to keep them at that level. And that's, I think, the biggest difference between. Now, I'll say this about the Big Ten. It's getting better.
Yeah.
When they've added the teams that they've added, and the Oregons and the UCLA, USC, that makes it a little bit tougher. And I think with the money thing, it's going to all even out. It's going to become more and more. If they can get the portal thing straight, I think
right,
it's going to become more and more even. But the South is definitely SEC is definitely a heck of a. Whoops, might have lost you there.
You had Texas to what we had. Now we got to deal with Texas and Oklahoma, and you'd add Missouri that's playing great football. They have a great coaching staff. And I used to think the SEC was unbearable because I had to play LSU and Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Florida and Georgia, Alabama. And now you add a couple of more. I just think it's a tougher league top to bottom right now. I know it is in the ACC, but I think it probably is in the SEC. At least until to see how the NILs play out. It may play out and make some weaker teams stronger down the road if they want to put more money in.
Well, I think that's what's going to happen. It is going to, I just the lower level teams. I don't know how they're going to succeed. I really don't. But once again, I mean, you look in the NFL. There's a lot of players in the NFL that are from a smaller school, and just
right.
because you're a smaller school doesn't mean if you're a good enough player. You got an opportunity. You can play in the NFL, so it's not that's not. But I think when you look at the depth of the rosters and the level of the players, and it's just tough. Every Saturday, it's you got A&M in there. That I haven't seen them as much, but the two times I've seen them, they're a pretty good football team.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the thing that and we were talking about this off the air before we started today. I think I agree with you also. I'm not overwhelmed by the NIL money. I mean, coaches got to admit they're making a lot of money nowadays. I mean, and so the players see that, and the schools are making a lot of money. And so the players should have at least the desire to make that money. I think where the problem lies, that's probably a little different than free agency and NFL is we don't have any limits. I mean, the portal transfer comes open twice a year, and any time you can jump. I think the good move, is that we eliminated the second portal transfer opening window, which will be good, but you can't hardly build a roster or build a football program when if you lose players after spring ball, it's a whole lot of trouble. Or if you don't play them enough during the season, you lose them very quickly, So I think the portal has to be dealt with, at least to be monitored.
Well, I think it's hard kids just jump. I mean, you got, And I think every situation is different. I mean, in particular, the quarterback position.
Right.
I mean, the kid wants to play quarterback, but still, as a team, it's just hard. And then you got the locker room issues. I mean, you got one kid over there that's making $400,000 or $500,000, dollars, and maybe a guy that's making $50,000, and he's a better player and doing more. So I think it'll eventually become, and I think that's what college is trying to do. It'll eventually become like the NFL, where they slot the players and slot the positions. I mean, and that's the money you're going to get, and there won't be a big difference between the teams. And I think Ronnie told me this: schools are getting away from where you can even see what they're paying players, how they go through the conferences,
Yeah.
and so it's that kind of thing is, they'll get it figured out, but I hope so anyway, because it's too great a game, and you're just saying it to become lopsided one way or the other.
Talk about you got 4 jobs open in the conference. If you're sitting here as a head football coach, and you can take any of these 4 jobs, rank them in order. You got Auburn, LSU, Florida, Arkansas. And keep in mind now, the guy that got fired at LSU just won 29 games over the previous 3 years, and they paid him $50 million not to coach.
Well, I tell you, they're all pretty good jobs. I mean, Florida's a great job. LSU's a great job. Auburn's a great job. I told you this many times. Auburn is one of the loudest. Seattle Seahawks is the loudest stadium I've ever been in. And we played them a bunch of times, NFC Championship games. But the Auburn, then my War Eagles get going now. Was that 92 or 93? And we played there in
93.
We're getting ready to go up 17-0.
I know.
10-yard line. Danny throws that interception. It goes back 95 for a touch. And I mean, that stadium, it hurts your ear. It was, but that is, I mean, obviously it's a great job as well. And I think along with that type of a job, then the pressure to win and the fan base and so forth. But I just wonder what would happen if the fan base would kind of get behind the team, because the coaches, they kind of bunker in this. They don't read what's going on. You don't ever.
No.
Anyway, I don't read it. I told Ryan this last time. I used to have the Christian radio station on in my office in Florida, and one day they come on and they said, hey, let's have a prayer for Coach Ron Zook. And I told my I said, man, it must be getting bad out there.
Ron, I've got to tell you something, how true what you're saying is true. When I was a kid growing up, and my father was a head coach at West Virginia, there was no internet. No, they were talking about the 60s and 70s, early 70s. We would, if we won a game, we would go by the newspaper stand, which was a store, and buy every newspaper from Pittsburgh to Morgantown and read all about us. If we lost a game, Dad would not buy one newspaper, and we would not read a newspaper, because all it does is fill your head full of negative. And I thought that was one of the best lessons I learned. If you're going to coach, you better shut out the outside noise, because it don't go away. And now it's louder than ever.
Well,
and Jeff Bauer, when I was at Southern Miss, he'd talk about the message board. He's like, you guys don't read that. That thing's a fellowship of the miserable. And he was right.
Well, I mean, here's the problem. Coaches, they can circumvent to get away from it, and they don't read it, and they're in their offices working their butts off, but their families read it.
Oh, yeah.
Worse than that is
players.
Players read it. The players are going to read it, and it's just so negative, and it's propaganda. And you tell somebody they're bad long enough, they're going to begin to believe they're bad.
Yeah. I said that yesterday, I think, with Auburn. I said the important thing for Auburn people is, man, give those players all the love that you can give them right now. And those assistant coaches that are running the show, give them all the love that you can give them right now, because they're not feeling really good about anything right now.
Well, it's hard to be positive when you don't know the outcome. You don't know what's going to happen, what's ahead. And these guys, because right now the portal's open, so they've got runners, or they get, I don't know if they're supposed to or not, but they got people contacting them right now.
Yeah.
And I talked to a guy a couple of weeks ago I'd coached with, and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm looking at Florida's running backs. I mean, they're recruiting.
Right. Oh, no.
And that's what's happening. So now as a coach, you're trying to get them ready for the next game, and focus in on the game plan, what they got to do that way. And then they got somebody in their ear talking about, hey, they're going to offer me this much money if I go here, and I can do this. And, so they're these kids love to be recruited, as you well know.
Oh, yes.
And so now it's, and then the parents get involved, and then it's, they're giving us this much. What can you do for us? And, so you're losing, you're trying to win games, and you got them worried about the next job.
Well, it's interesting, too, because I'm only 2 years removed from coaching my last year at ULM, Sun Belt Conference. And you probably could understand this. It doesn't matter if my guy was a first or second teamer. If they were any good at all, everywhere was better than there. They were being contacted because you know how it is on Friday night. You give your pep talk or your last team talk before you put them to bed. And I could look in my players' eyes, and I did. When my quarterback wouldn't look me in the eye, he's already being talked to. When he wasn't on the front edge of his seat during my motivational talk, and I'm not the best in the world, I guess, but he's already been talked to, and that's probably why you better be careful about where your second teamer is nowadays, because that's probably who they're already talking. Like you said, it may not be right, but believe me, it's happening.
Well, I think in recruiting, and what coaches have to do too is, you not only, my wife can tell you a good football player, but do they like football?
Yeah.
You got to get these guys that football is important to them. Do they like football? And because it's a hard game, and it's hard to do the things that you have to do to be good. And when if there's a way out or there's noise in the system, then it just makes it tough. And I just really wonder if people would, and they're not going to do that, but if people would just kind of buy along and, hey, this be positive, and let's try to help these guys and make them feel good about themselves. And at the end of the year, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If the program's not going up, then if you feel like you have to make a change, you have to make a change. But there's so many things involved in the attitude of the football team to keep them on the level that you want to keep them.
Right.
So
What about, how do you think you're friends with John Gruden? His name's been floating around some of these jobs. You're going to have 30 plus jobs open and probably more than that. How does he fit in college?
Oh, John would be great in college. John, first of all, because he loves football and he loves people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he can talk to anybody. I mean, I've been in there when players, in fact, he had the Alabama offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in there last week. They're open. Like Alabama was open. They were in there. I mean, he loves to talk ball. He knows ball. He knows people. He loves to talk with people. He would be a great recruiter. And I think his situation, he wants to coach, I think. I mean, I'll walk in there some days. I walked in there last Sunday morning real early, and because John's one of the guys that he's a grinder. He doesn't sleep. And I says, well, the good thing is, there's 50% of the coaches that feel terrible right now. You don't have to worry about that feeling.
Right.
On Monday, that terrible feeling. But I think that's why you coach. The challenge, the opportunity to put yourself against somebody else, and I think the biggest thing, my thing in coaching was trying to get players. How do you get players to play to their very, very best, better than they think they can?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can get the whole football team playing better than they think they can play, then you're going to be as good as you are. And then, and that's where John is good. He's a very knowledgeable coach, as I said. He's knowledgeable in the game. He loves the game. That's all he does. And he would be great in college. And it's like going back to what you asked me before. How do you coach those guys? Well, you coach them the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't coach them any different. And once again, it's players want to be coached. They want, if you can make sure they understand that they're getting better, you're helping them become a better football player and reach their goals. Then that's what it's all about. So, but he would be good.
I'm trying to think of, and I don't know if you even want to comment on this. I've been there's so many names are thrown out for the Florida job. Is the Florida job? Do you consider that a great job? Is it a job that has all the possibilities still? Because I know when I was at Florida State years back, because you guys at Florida State was a girls' school till 1950, and then it began to develop. And we used to always say, well, in the great state of Florida with all those players, Florida was just a little more centrally located, was a little more, just a few more kids with the Gator on their hat instead of the Seminole. But that's kind of changed a lot now. But it still is probably one of the premier jobs in the country.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. It's a great job. But so is Florida State.
Yeah.
Go back and look what your dad did. Tell me who, maybe 2-3 people in the history of football has done what your dad did in the 90s. I think people lose sight of that. They forget, and all these know-it-alls now, they don't go back and they don't know football. They don't know the history of football. But go back and look what your dad did in the 90s, and you talk about good football teams now, and that's hard to do. It's hard to maintain. And you hear Coach Saban talk about it all the time. getting there is one thing, but staying there that
Yeah.
becomes the problem. And your dad was able to do that. But all these know-it-all, these people, they don't know football. They don't know the history of the game and what it took to get there and all that stuff. So, but yeah, it's a great job. And I think all the SEC jobs are great jobs. I mean, Arkansas is the one that would probably be the one that people wouldn't say was the best. But, I know I haven't been there in a long time, but facility-wise, they had great facilities. I think what happened is maybe, and this doesn't matter as much. I know when I was at Tennessee in 83, 4, and 5, or 84, whenever I was there, the one thing that made Tennessee a little bit tougher is just wasn't as many players in the state of Tennessee.
Right.
Arkansas is a little bit like that. But now with money and so forth, you're nationally recruiting anyway.
Yeah, I was going to add that too. I think the thing that made Florida, when my dad even went to Florida State, and the record you were talking about, my dad went 14 straight years, ending up in the top 4 every single year, either AP or Associated Press, UPI or AP, and not to have he didn't have an off year from 87 on through till 91, I think it was, 2001. But with the NIL, it does give teams like Arkansas. We used to think of Florida with so many players in the state. That was the first true advantage. But I think even Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, with the way they're pulling players into the state without but population, it's not there. Arkansas doesn't have the number of players in the state. But the fact that you can add with NIL does give you a better chance, I believe, to take a program that doesn't have as many power Division I athletes in state and add to your roster.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any question, and that's what's going to level out, I think, the game. The portal. If they can get the portal thing straight, then I think you're going to have more really good teams. I think it's been a long time since teams could stack players like they used to back in the early days and Bo Schembechler days, where they could stack players. Because of that, you don't see that anymore. But it's going to be I keep harping on the portal, but to me, that's the thing they gotta get fixed.
Before we let you go, talk about a lot of firings going on. How hard is it on families? I know that you used to say there's 2 kinds of coaches' wives: great ones and excellent. If I was still doing it, I'd probably have an X one. But I know Jack. My wife, Jacqueline. Your oldest daughter went to 3 high schools, if I remember right, Jacqueline. So
3 high schools, and my youngest daughter went to 3 middle schools, and it's hard because not only are they moving from school to school, they now they and if things don't go right, they got to listen to the kids, all the negative talk about their dad and their family, and it's just it's tough on them. But we talk about it now that they're all grown, got their own kids, and it taught them about life, and I think they're both doing very well now. So they made it, but it is tough, and I think and once again, not only the families and the wives, Denise built 13 homes, and I mean we've been all over. She does all that stuff. I don't do any of that stuff. She comes, she does everything, but it's hard on the family and the players. You look at the players too. It's hard on the players. These players, they get, at least the guys where I've coached. I mean, you get pretty close to your players. They're like your sons. People used to say, "Well, don't you wish you had a boy?" I got 2 girls. I said, "No, I got 100 boys. I don't need any more boys. I got all the issues I need." But it's hard on the players too. It really is, because they're unsettled. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know about the next staff. How's the staff going to come in? A lot of guys don't want to prove themselves again, and they think I've done all this, put all this work in to prove myself, and now I got to do it all over again. If I got to do it again, I'm just going to go somewhere else. And it's just not good for the game.
Let me end with this question too, because I just got back. I was at West Virginia last weekend for a reunion of all the players that played for Bobby Bowden. It was about 6 years. A wonderful time. Tommy and I both played for my dad. And then the funny thing that when my dad left, Frank Signetti, I don't know if you knew Frank at all, but
I worked with Frank.
Yeah, Frank, one of the greatest offensive minds. We know where Kurt got his smarts from. But I went back and the relationships that I developed in my 5 years at West Virginia, And you went to Miami of Ohio, which people down south don't realize the cradle of coaches. Now, maybe no school has put more great coaches into the profession of professional and college football than Miami of Ohio. But that's the one thing I wonder if these kids are going to have. Are they going to have a fight song? Are they going to love their colors? Are they going to meet their wife? The more you jump around with the portal, the more you don't get. Some of the greatest things you get are the relationships that we get out of college football.
No question. I mean, it's how can you go through college 4 or 5 years with these guys that the guys I played with, guys in front of me and behind me, I'm still close to.
Yeah.
I talk to him. John McVay, I talk to him every week, and you don't. I don't know if you lose that. I think when you move around, because it's relationships like that build stronger and stronger over time. The things that you go through and that kind of thing. But no, I don't like the fact of across the country either. I mean,
no.
it's if I'm from the South or the Midwest or the East Coast and I'm playing at Oregon, is that where I'm going to live? Probably not. We used to say one of the things that going to school is probably is the area you're probably going to end up in.
That's right.
Not always, but it's different. It's a different game, and it's still a great game.
Yeah.
Does it have some issues? Yeah, it has some issues, but. I used to always say about the pressure that the coaches are under. That's why you want to coach at a job like this. That's what makes the Auburns and the Floridas and the Alabamas, what they are. You expected to win, and you understand that going in, and it doesn't make it any easier. But you got to have some luck. The chips got to fall your way too. So part of it.
We appreciate you being with us.
Well,
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you, Ron. Pure appreciate it. Thank you. Take care now.
Talk to you later.
All right.
See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
It was sure good. He's sure been a part. I didn't want to get into it, but when we had our biggest wins at Auburn in '93, he was the defensive coordinator at Florida that year.
In '94.
In '94. But I didn't want to tell people, I didn't want to say this because I have such respect for, I consider Steve Spurrier one of the finest play callers I've ever gone up against. But they lost those 2 games because Steve Spurrier was impatient. He didn't like winning by a little. He thought he should win by a lot, and they were a lot better than us. And he kept throwing the ball probably when he shouldn't have thrown it, but Ron mentioned 90.
Ron
well,
got
93.
blamed,
What's that?
I said Ron got blamed. Spurrier.
Oh, I know, but it was if they just don't throw interceptions. Both years they had 4 or 5 turnovers. And both years it was either Terry Dean or Danny Werfel. They were throwing interceptions, and he mentioned the one that went 95 or 96 yards in '93. That changed the whole game, and that was one of those where a flat route in going into the goal line. They were about to finish us off there before the half. Probably would have ended that great season at least at a undefeated part. And then the next year we play them in Florida. And they're the number 1 ranked offense and defense in the country, and they're 17-point favorites. But we kept it real close the whole game, and I think Coach Spurrier was so irritated that because he thought he should have been killing us, and he probably should have, that he kept throwing, and with about 50 seconds left, the game basically over, he throws an interception down the field, and we go back and score all with 15 seconds left to win the game that year as well. And but it had a lot more to do with turnovers than it had to do with defense coordinators, I promise you.
Yeah, he always talked about, he said, Spurrier just stopped throwing interceptions. We'd have won the game. He'd rip me in the press, and it was him that was losing the game.
Well, and I'll say this, it works against you or for you. Steve Spurrier played at Florida. He was loved by Florida. And so if things didn't go right, it was the coordinator's fault. It wasn't his fault. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you'd love to have that little bit of an edge. And I still think of Coach Spurrier as one of the most fun guys for me to coach against, because you always felt like you were going against one of the best play callers in the business. And it made it more enjoyable going against him. And Joe Lee Dunn was a defensive coordinator, crazy defensive coordinator. And I caught him at 3 different universities, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss, where he ran unconventional defenses. But when I got to line up against him, it was as a play caller, it was enjoyable. Florida, it was always fun to see how many times Steve Spurrier would throw his visor down, and which always, speaking of visors, Lane Kiffin, I saw an interview the other day where he said, the reason I wear a visor because my hero was Steve Spurrier, and Steve Spurrier wore a visor. I just haven't seen Lane Kiffin throw his on the ground too many times, I guess. Steve used to get so mad when things didn't go right, and he'd throw those things on the ground. But appreciate Ron Zook coming in and just give us a little insight into all this stuff and where it is right now. But what's the latest on Auburn? I guess it's still the issue right now. Although we can talk about the loss to Kentucky, I think that becomes secondary after the decisions that were made after it. The 7 sacks obviously was a little bit more of the same thing, inability to score, and as I continue to think about this and the Auburn situation, I think Hugh got himself into he backed up into a wall. I mean, not only was he the head coach, so now every win is counted. You're responsible for wins and losses. But when you're the play caller and your offense does not play well, you're now the guy that you can't dismiss your offensive coordinator. You can't tell your fans, or whether you want to tell them or not, or they may think, I'm going to get rid of a coordinator and make this thing right, because you are the coordinator of the caller of plays. And then the fact that you got the quarterback that you wanted, whether he's good enough or not good enough. And I mentioned this yesterday in our special segment we did yesterday, that there were a lot of good quarterbacks out there. And if Auburn's doing what I think Auburn says they're doing, they're paying whatever they got to pay for the best players in America, then I do believe there were, and although I wasn't against Jackson Arnold, I just have looked. I thought there were some 3 or 4 quarterbacks that were better quarterbacks, and then there are coaches that I'll even look at Chandler Morris at Virginia and what they're doing with him at quarterback. And Prabula was not a great player at Penn State, and how good he was. He got hurt at Missouri, but how good he was playing. Of course, Mateer he was after. I guess what I'm saying is you kind of got all that in you're holding that onto your own. I remember my first year that I went into Auburn, I really worried that we would not be able to win much because we come off of 2 losing seasons. That Coach Dye had 2 losing seasons and 3 straight losses to Alabama. And I worried that we were not going to have much success. And I retained my brother Tommy. And although he was the offensive coordinator, I would not name him the offensive coordinator. I said, I'll be the offensive coordinator. Not because I thought I would win with my success. But I thought I'd rather me get the blame than him. I said, this isn't going to be pretty at times. And I don't want them because I'm going to call the plays. But I want to make sure that I get the discredit, because I thought there would be some tough times a little more. But I quickly named him the coordinator the next year after we won. He did the exact same thing. I just like to call the plays. I've always said when your head coach calls the plays, your offensive coordinator is required to make sure that he gives you a game plan, and his job is to make sure everything on the game plan works. You can execute it. My job is to call them properly. His job, if I say, okay, I want to leave this is the game plan that you gave me. I'm leaving these plays on. Now you make sure we can execute them. Because if I call them and it's a bad call, that's one thing. But if we can't execute it, I got a problem for you not taking it off the list. But anyway, that being said, that's little added information of Hugh Freeze, and I know he's going through it. I'm sure there's a little bit. If he's smart, he'll seclude, or his family will seclude. Just because it's difficult to listen to all the reasons everybody wants to say you lose, when bottom line is, whether it's Ron Zook or Bobby Bowden, Terry Bowden, or anybody out there, you don't win as many games as they want you to win. That's generally the case, is you're not winning enough ball games, which after 5 years, in that 6th year of us, we lost early games, 1-5, and it happened that year.
Yeah, and another thing, the sad thing about Freeze is that he had every opportunity. There's more alignment at Auburn than there's been in a long, long time. You've got great facilities. You've got NIL money. He didn't follow Pat Dye like you did. He didn't follow Steve Spurrier like we did in Florida. He didn't have any of those. He followed the worst coach in Auburn in God knows how long, and Brian Harsin. And so he had everything set up. And for whatever reason,
It just didn't pan, and he recruited. The one thing you got to understand is that Auburn and some schools more so than others, and Auburn is more so than others. The fans are very smart. They have a very good recruiting IQ. They follow recruiting. They understand recruiting. Pat Dye's fame. If I don't care what you can talk about what you want to talk about, because when you face Bear Bryant, but you got Bo Jackson, that made a statement to everybody that wears orange and blue and crimson and white, what you were going to do at Auburn. You got Bo Jackson. He wasn't kind of good. He was real good. And I really, when I came in, they had just gotten Steve Davis. He was kind of that number one back in the country too, like Bo was. And then I was down at Florida, down at Auburn. The first game I've been able to go to since I left, I was at the Auburn, Georgia game. And who was on the radio right before me? Cam Newton. And when you get Cam Newton, he looked like a defensive end still.
Mm-hmm.
When you got and they retired his number, but when you get Cam Newton, I mean that kind of says it like it is. But Hugh was a good recruiter, and there was some like that. But the marquee guy, I think whoever gets the job, they need to understand Auburn's about recruiting. And you better. I know I met Willie Anderson. We signed my first year. He was the number one offensive lineman in the country. Thank goodness he was in Mobile. And thank goodness Joe Witt was on our staff that had recruited Mobile for a long. I kept Joe Witt, not for Willie Anderson, but I'll say that was a good reason we kept him, because if Joe Witt down in Mobile, he had fought those wars down there many times, and we got Jesse McCovery and Willie Anderson and Damian Craig that year, all out of Mobile, and we were coming off of a young coach and 2 losing seasons. But that recruiting becomes critical, and it's going to look shaky here for a while. It's going to look like everybody's going to jump in the portal, and you got to do what you can, and then see what you can do when you get through with it. But that's the course Auburn took, and it will not be the only school doing it, and everybody's going to have to recover from it. But because of NIL, because of the how long it takes for people to get into school, there's going to be able to recovery depending on what they do with their coaching staff.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think Auburn people just have to be patient. It's going to be a long month, 6 weeks till there's a hire, and you're going to have players that leave, and you're going to have other players that cycle in, and that's the nature of the business. I mean, I remember when after we got fired at Florida, and the athletic director came in and said, and he was talking to the team and everybody else, and Channing Crowder, who I'm sure you remember, played in the NFL a long time. I won't say exactly what he said on the air, but he left the room. And he was one of our best players. But he declared early. And so, but I think if I remember correctly, we signed 21 or 22 starters, I think, on Urban's first national championship team.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say Urban Meyer went public. I don't know if you remember this, but he publicly said his first national championship at Florida, over 3/4 of his players were ones that Ron Zook signed. He says, I won this championship because the players that Ron Zook brought in. And I think there was just a little bit of impatience and patience. Now, I will say this, when you talk about people better have patience, first of all, have some patience that they hire the right coach. Have some patience. I don't know how much patience anybody's going to have anymore on how many years they're going to give you to win, but it'd be nice if they would have some patience. But I do think the cupboard's not bare. And if they get the right guy with NIL and the time, that there'll be enough time left to make contact with the right players. And I'll say this, you got to coach them up, and we can have this debate till the cows come home. That do you win with great players or you win with great coaching? And I still think that's a 1 and 2, but I think it's a 1A and 2A. I just think they're that close together. When I cover not just the SEC and not just Auburn on a daily basis, I cover the SEC, the ACC, and the top 25 around the country. And I see offensive coordinators and coaches that lose their quarterback and they bring up the second one and they do just as well. Or they lose their top 3 players and the next year they develop a style. So I guess what I do believe that hiring the right guy is important, and him hiring the right assistants is important, because just like in chess, some people can move the pieces around better than others. That's a fact now. I mean, there's a fact, and I can tell you because I've coached against them. I've lined up against people, and I say, man, I'm glad this coordinator's too vanilla. This guy's vanilla. I know what he's going to do. I know what he does in every situation. And there are others, and I would think Brent Venables, I always felt he went in that category, that game to game, you have no idea what they're going to do, but they're going to be ready to play, and they're going to have a great game plan. Or an offensive guy that no matter who is their roster, they're going to find the right scheme to match that talent, or they're so good at working quarterbacks, they're going to get that quarterback to work. And we're seeing it in so many places where they just line up and put a new guy in, or they break in their next mold. Quarterback, probably the hardest position, either to get the right new one, or worse than that is to lose your first teamer. And if you don't have a good second teamer, and so I think that's probably the biggest thing nowadays, because of the portal, you can't hardly keep two good ones on your roster, or two veterans. You get a good one and a good young one. And the good young one's not quite ready, but the good veteran's already gone. If he didn't become your starter, he's not there anymore. And so it's hard to lose a Stan White and put Pat Nix in. That doesn't happen anymore. That's what I was able to do to go undefeated in 93. I took one great one out and put another great one in. And that Pat Nix, probably, as much as he loved Auburn, he'd have been like Bo. He'd have been Bo Nix. He'd have gone somewhere and been a starter, but without having to wait, probably. And thank goodness, a little different now than back then.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that Auburn people have to realize is that this search could end up anywhere. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's so many jobs, and if you've got a target, lock him down, because it's going to be a wild year. And if you miss on a guy, let's not forget John Cohen hired Joe Moorhead and Mike Leach at Mississippi State. He can think outside the box. Yeah. So just because Hugh Freeze was hired and he was kind of a safe hire last time, don't assume that's good. That's where it's going.
I think you're exactly right, and I think it's critical that I don't care whether you think out of the box or think in the Auburn box, but you got to find a guy that knows how to coach football. And I'm not the CEO type. Then they better have a proven record of knowing how to hire people, because I want a guy that has shown he can line up on a Saturday and stand on that sideline and call plays or call defenses, or he's very involved. And as you now 5-10 years down the road, they may turn some of that over, and you see a different style. But right now, I'd like somebody that can do. And there are coaches out there, and you're right. They go to different extremes. And now that we've talked to Ron Zook, now I'm thinking, gosh, maybe John Gruden might be a good coach. I'm not big on taking older pro coaches, and he's not that old, but he's been coaching a long time, and moving them into college. I just think there is a difference in some of the day-to-day things that you have to pick up on. I've not been big on it. Ron he's been at both levels, and he felt like there's another name. But I look at the John Sumrall, who I know pretty well, Jimbo Fisher, who you say, well, he he had everything you could want at Texas A&M. Well, sometimes you have a couple of things go wrong, but his body of work is pretty dang good. I mean, and I've worked around him a lot, and the sucker knows how to, if Jimbo Fisher cannot have to do all the collateral things that it takes him away from his sideline, he's as good a game day coach as I've ever had. And I thought I was a pretty good game day guy. But I'll never forget that, and I wish I could have mentioned this to Ron Zook, is that we were playing Ron at Florida, and they were undefeated, number one team, offense, defense, ranked number one, and we're coming off like a 15 or 16 game winning streak, and we're 17-point underdogs in Gainesville. And as we put our headsets on and we go through our first series offensively, the defense goes on the field next. I said, Jimbo, what looks good? And Tommy was on the headset too, and Trickett, and Jimbo says everything. I'm thinking, Jimbo, everything never looks good, but he's so positive, and he could see the field so well. So that's his strength. His strength to me is, and I imagine that might have been affected at Texas A&M. Sometimes you get pulled away by all the other duties. And I've always said, if that's what you got, if you got a head job by being a head coach, by being a great play caller, before you do anything else, stick with it one more year. My favorite story was the Bear defense was Ryan, not Rex Ryan, his dad. who was his dad who invented the Bear defense?
Buddy Ryan.
We're going
Buddy Ryan.
Buddy Ryan, who invented the Bear defense, the Chicago Bears, 46 defense, covering both guards and the nose guard type of defense. He invented that and put it in with the Bears, and they won the Super Bowl under Ditka. Well, Ditka ended up retiring, and then he got moved up to head coach, and he got fired in about a year or two, And they asked him what happened, what'd you do wrong? He said, well, the worst thing I did is I fired my best assistant coach, my best coordinator, which was himself. He took himself off the one thing he did better than anybody, which was run the defense. And so, and it's funny because his son Rex was at Morehead State when I played against Morehead State from Sanford, and I faced the Bear defense a year later. That Rex was running it at Morehead State, and there. But anyway, I think as we talk about these coaches, you got some that, and you got a heck of a coach on the staff, DJ Durkin. But what are the fans? I mean, you get the best guy, but also you got fans that are watching very closely, and you've got people that have had to pony up to buy out a contract. Everybody, all those things are factors, and people, and I look at the program. We've had 4 straight losing seasons. It could go to 5. And this doesn't need to be a mistake. This doesn't need to be a bad move, and you go from John Sumrall, who's a great G5 coach, and I know because he was at Troy, and I coached against him 2 years at Troy, and I've known him a little longer than that, and Jimbo Fisher, and you could go on down the line to other coaches whose names have been thrown in the mix, and then whether they and it kind of scared, and what I'm gonna say this at Auburn, you may not believe, because I'm like Ron Zook. It's still, when you go into that stadium and you watch the game and you see the excitement, the enthusiasm, and the history, you want to coach at Auburn. Yeah. But when you see it, for every coach that's succeeded, about 5 or 6 have been fired. It's a tough. The expectations are very high, and maintaining those expectations are very high. And the last 2 coaches haven't lasted 3 years, which means those guys are probably wondering what's wrong. Why I got
I think the other thing is that, Auburn's in a really unique spot. And I say that because Auburn has been known for dysfunction for so long. And if you look at the programs, whoever Penn State hires, probably not in the same talent pool that Auburn's hiring from. Mm-hmm. So if you look at who Auburn's competing against, you're competing against Florida and LSU. Well, if I'm sitting here as a coach, everybody talks about LSU's this great job, and I do think it's a great job. You just fired a guy who averaged almost 10 wins a season. Right. Now, if I'm a coach and I've got LSU, Florida, and Auburn on a plate, I'm taking Florida or Auburn. I'm not going to a place that just fired a guy and paid him $50 million not to coach that won 10 games every year. That's me. I mean, what are the expectations? I mean,
and you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I think Auburn has high expectations, but there's going to be a little, they're going to be a little more accepting if you have to build, or if you have to suffer through something. I will say this, unlike LSU, Auburn, and we shouldn't look over our shoulder, but the fact is winning the state championship is awfully important. Yes. And if you can win the state championship, you can win the national championship. But that's, I was 3-2 against Alabama, and I was 3-1-1 against Georgia. And that kind of keeps you going when those things happen. But you're right. I mean, Auburn is the last 2 that have been related. The wins didn't come, and not even the 8 or 9 wins didn't come. So, but I think the key. What's that?
Jerry, but I think the other thing people are underestimating is that when you're a coach, you're also looking at alignment, and that's one reason Brent Venables didn't end up at Auburn. Before. When Harsin was hired. If you look at Florida, they don't have a president. You got an AD who just got an extension, but when there's a new president, he's shaky at best. So if you're a football coach and you're going in there in 2 years, you're going to have a different AD, you're going to have a different president. If you're at LSU, you have no president and no AD. You're probably going to have a president, but the AD that hires you is probably not going to be the AD that you're working for. So if you're hired at Auburn, the president and the AD,
stability.
They're going to be there, and so
I think that's huge. I think for a coach that knows what he's doing or has been hired by a few different schools, having the retention of the AD that hired you is very important, because ADs quite often they make their mark, get their raise, get moved up in the status by their ability to hire a football coach. Mm-hmm. And if they come into a situation, they really would just quietly hope they get to hire their own coach, somewhere down the line. And so I think at Auburn, you're not dealing with that. Right now I think everybody can pull together at Auburn. And the thing I would hope is that whoever is making that decision, not the people that people think are making the decision, whoever is totally making the decision. And I would think that's to be the same guy that has to be the final vote when you want to get rid of them. And when you want to get rid of somebody and pay that much money, somebody's got to have the finance. I mean, either there's a fine, and even on the board of trustees, there's a athletic finances committee. And there always was when I was there. And that person, at least, he's got to look at the dollars and cents. And although it's going to be a vote, whatever the AD wants, the trustees have got to say, okay, we're going to give you the right to pick him. Or we're not going to give you the right to pick him. Or we're going to give you the right to retain him. But we're going to vote on it and make sure we're all, because we have we've been a part of Auburn all of our lives. That's where your trustees come in. And I think as they're involved, they need to be very involved, because the worst thing can happen is that and I think ADs are crazy if they do want to. I want to do it by myself. No, I want the richest. I want the strongest people to vote the same way I do. I want to say, is this the guy you want too? Because they're the people ultimately that can make the decision as things get. You need to hang on, because Ron Zook was saying that. Let's hang on through the tough times and get back to the winning times. And if you got the right guy, he'll get through it right now.
He will. And Harsin was hired when there was no alignment. I mean, yeah. Harsin was hired when, you're walking into LSU. I mean, LSU and Florida, Auburn's kind of gotten through that where you've got a president and AD that kind of are on the same page.
Right.
You don't have that at LSU and Florida right now. So no. Harsin never had a chance to make it for a whole multitude of reasons. Number one, he didn't try. But we can go down that rabbit hole. Freeze was given every opportunity, and it just kind of got away from him. Just Kentucky game kind of felt like, okay, well, I mean, if he ends up 7-5, then I think he's still the coach next year. But the Kentucky game, it was just kind of like, okay, I mean, I think we were all. I mean, I texted you during the game. I say, he can't survive this, and you agreed with me. And
but I think I kept thinking things would kind of turn. That's the one game it had to kind of turn, because you had Kentucky that has not had a great season. Good football team, as are most teams, if not all the teams in the SEC. Good football teams. But if you're going to knock one off, it needed to be Kentucky. And then to not score a touchdown, only get to the red zone one time, and then have 7 sacks, and sacks have been a problem. And you went to your backup quarterback, and it was kind of the same thing as the first quarterback. Like I say, that's what you texted me about. You kind of said, you know what? I think the people behind the scenes are saying, you know what? We got to stop the bleeding. And I think that's probably where they went in that regard. I don't know whether right or wrong, and that. Like I say, it's because it is because of winning and not because of anything else. I keep thinking about that golf. He plays too much golf. Fellas, Steve Spurrier played golf on Thursdays during the season. Mm-hmm. I just want y'all to, he tore the SEC up, tore it up, owned it for almost 10 years. And he played golf on Thursdays during the season a lot. So,
and he would conduct staff meetings from the golf course in the spring.
Well, Steve was very confident. He knew how to coach. He knew how to lead, but he also knew how to live. He knew how to live and have a life. And I think, but the problem is, if he'd have lost, they'd have blamed it on that golf. I promise you, if he had not been a successful coach, they'd have said, well, he plays golf on Thursday. Well, that's not. Everybody wants to win. I promise you. Hugh Freeze wants to win. I wish I could have been a good golfer. I was terrible. I don't care if I didn't play a lot, but I was a terrible golfer.
Rick always went to ski. He neither one of us had the patience to play golf, so he would go ski. So
who was that?
Zook water ski.
I thought that's what he did. I knew he didn't play golf. I didn't play golf or like to play golf. I like to fish. and but didn't want to. I used to say I don't fish because when I cast my lure, it hooks to it slices to the right. If I play too much golf, my lure starts to slice, and so I make sure I don't fish and mess up my casting my casting motion. But anyway, it'll be interesting. I don't think anything right now. We got to hope that they can. Durkin's got to rally that group together, and this is going to be a tough one against Vandy.
Yeah.
And,
but before we wrap up, what's your prediction for this week? How's the team going to respond?
Well, I've watched. I think they respond very well. I think the first thing you think is, well, just it's everybody's nervous that there's no direction, that they're disappointed, they're down, and I think it has just the opposite effect. It may not last, but I think it has the opposite effect. I think people rally together. The players rally together. The coaches rally together. And like Florida probably could have, should have, would have beaten Georgia. They got stopped at the end, and then Georgia scored. They got stopped on a 4th and 1 to ice the game in the fourth quarter, or they beat Georgia. And they came out playing well. And if you look back to Virginia Tech after they fired their coach, they came out and won a couple of games. And Arkansas has been really productive after they made their decision. And UAB came back and beat they beat They beat Memphis or somebody. They beat one of the good teams that said, no way. And so I think they'll play well. I think they play well in this game. And I think if they can keep it close. The bottom line is I don't know who's going to call the plays. What offensively is there going to be any? It needs to. UCLA was 0-3, and that's another one. And they fired their coach, and they won their next 3, and they scored a ton of points where they couldn't score any points. And so there's some unknowns that you got. Is there somebody up there that's got a good feel for it? Is somebody that's going to lead? And does the coordinator now, offensive coordinator, have a good feel for calling plays? And those things. But I think it's going to be a good game. Is it a day game? Is it this late in the season?
Let's see.
I think it's probably getting late to have a night game. You wish it was a night game.
3 p.m.
Yeah, I figured it was a day game. And still,
PM.
It'll be Vanderbilt. They say, well, after that loss, they'll be keyed up, and they're always keyed up. They always play well. They didn't say they got whacked around for a half last week, but they finished up real well. And came within an onside kick that they probably could have recovered to win that game. But it's going to be a good one. But I haven't really looked at a lot of the scores. But I think Auburn. I'm not ready to pick a winner. I'm not sure what the line's going to be on this. Is it out yet? What is the line? Have you seen the line on this one yet?
The line.
I don't do my first national show till tomorrow. Tomorrow I go nationally.
Vandy by 7.5.
By 7.5. Boy, I tell you, I tend to like Auburn. I mean, because you got 7.5. I tend to think Auburn will pull together. But like I say, there are a lot of unknowns. I don't know if I'd be betting this game at all, to be honest with you, the way it is. I just hold off on this one. That way you cheer for Auburn and you don't panic on the daggum thing. But I would bet that they play very, very well. The defense isn't going to change, And Durkin he's auditioning a little bit, And I think he's going to have a great time. He does a great job as well. And I think it'll be important to him and all those coaches and all those players. So it should be interesting.
It should be. Good to be with you again this week. All
righty. Looking forward to it. I'll be back now. I think I'll be there for the Mercer game. So I'll be back in town. So hopefully we can get together there and I'll catch. My mother, has moved to Auburn. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to find time to get over there. I've just got so many podcasts that I do on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday morning. It's hard for me to move around too much, but I got to go see my mama. She's in Auburn.
She's a great lady.
She sure is. Well, listen, I thank you.
Guys, appreciate everybody tuning in, and click like and subscribe below. It helps us out.
Oh, let me say before we go, are we still in the air?
We are.
Haley, all right, Tom, let's think of Tom Haley and the Haley Family Foundation, who sponsors this podcast and have been so good to Auburn through scholarships and support, and are the one reason we're able to make this show possible. Tom Haley, the Haley Family Foundation, there in Auburn.
See you guys next week.
So long.
For For more than 100 years, the Haley Red Family Foundation has proudly supported Auburn University scholarships, investing in students' dreams and brighter futures. For over 25 years, we've also stood beside the Sheriff's Girls Ranch, helping young women find hope and opportunity. The Haley Red Family Foundation, building generations of success.